3 guys taking me just down this dead end street, and I was like really cautious, thinking there's no way a social media person that's that big would do something dodgy. And then he opened his door and he pulled out a sign that said,
"No way." Assalamu alaikum viewers and listeners, welcome back to another episode of Side by Side. I'm your host Kazi Shafiqur Rahman.
And got the police to borderline force me onto the plane. I was stuck in Peru from the age of 13 all the way up until I was 18. I wasn't allowed to leave the country at all.
This is a lot to take in.
I'd say to every Muslim in the UK, your actions are what other people are going to judge Islam based off of. Think about what you do, because that single action might be the difference between someone converting to Islam and someone believing it's a bad religion. Most people in the West have a similar mindset because of how it's portrayed in the media. It blew my mind that it was more of a self-help book than it was a pure religious book. Follow me and shared my post onto his story. Suddenly, I posted for 3 days and I'm talking to these people who I look up to.
This episode is brought to you by Buddy's London, the fried chicken legends of East London. Remember those classic PFC spots most of us grew up eating in? Well, Buddy's has brought back that old school East London fried chicken flavour with a modern twist, infused with secret Bangladeshi spices passed down through generations. Buddy's is a clean, family-friendly restaurant that uses technology to enhance the guest experience. Whether you're using their click and collect option or the deliver to your car concept via their app, Buddy's has you covered. Check them out at buddieslondon.com.
Assalamu alaikum, brother Ali.
Wa alaikum salam.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet
in
you
person.
Too. Yeah.
How's it going?
Going really good at the moment. Life's a bit crazy, but crazy's good, in my opinion.
Of course, I believe organized chaos is very important, because that's the only way you get things done.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're just waiting for everything to be perfect, I think it's
you'll be waiting forever.
Yeah, you'll be waiting forever. How's life at the moment? I mean, what are you up to?
Life is crazy. I took my SHAHADA, and since then it's been like 1,000 miles an hour. Everything's been happening so quickly. It's been good and overwhelming, but in a good way, if that makes sense.
When did you take your SHAHADA?
On the 14th of December. Yeah, at 11 p.m. 9 months ago now, roughly.
Wow. Yeah. So when did you take your SHAHADA?
So the SHAHADA was on the 14th of December, 9 months roughly ago now. And yeah, it's so weird, because at 4 or 5 months before then, I was a very borderline devout atheist. Like, I refused to believe. And I think that was mostly from my childhood, where religion was sort of forced on me. So I sort of did the opposite of accepting it, and I just refused every religion, and I was like, I can't have something that's affected me so much in my childhood. And then I started looking into Islam, and it's started to make more sense to me than everything.
So how
else.
did it go from opposition to acceptance?
Yeah. So I think the hardest thing for an atheist is to actually consider that there might be a God. And for me, it was the fact that I would refuse it. I wouldn't even listen to people because I was so against it. And the way it went from me not believing to considering it was actually a woman. I met a woman in early 2023, and she was Muslim, and we actually ended up dating, a bit haram, but yeah, we dated for a bit, and she put up with so much, because I was the worst. She'd explain stuff like why we pray and stuff like that, and I just wouldn't get it at all. And I'd always say, like, the fact that you do some of this stuff is just crazy. I can't believe you pray 5 times a day. I can't believe you believe in these stories of like unrealistic things. And now that I look back at it, may have been a bit offensive, but I just didn't know better. And yeah, after a few months with her, I decided to buy a Quran. And well, I didn't even buy it. I just got the audiobook and started to listen to it. And it went from my opinion of the Quran beforehand. I never read it before. I'd only seen posts online from atheist groups, and I just thought it was an extremist, dangerous book to read. If you read it, you'd immediately want to join ISIS and just become an extremist.
You just get sucked in somehow.
That was just my mindset. And most people in the West have a similar mindset because of how it's portrayed in the media. It's not got a good look. And when I actually started reading it, it blew my mind that it was more of a self-help book than it was a pure religious book. Now, there are religious parts in it, but it's mostly like a guide on how to live your life. And I was really into self-help books, all of the ones that, entrepreneurs recommend you and everything. I'd read one every 2 weeks or as much as I could. And then after reading the Quran, I was like, straight away on my story, I'd post it and say, this is like the best self-help book I've ever read. And the first time I read it in 3 weeks, or listened to it on audiobook in 3 weeks, which now I found out is actually crazy, but I just listened to it whilst on a walk or whilst on a run and stuff. And funny enough, I'd listen to it whilst showering, which now that I know is you're not supposed to do.
Wow.
Yeah, but I found that out actually whilst I was on Umrah. I found out you're not supposed to listen to the Quran whilst in the toilet or in the bathroom.
Wow.
But yeah, I listened to it within 3 weeks, and it was audiobook, and I was like distracted. So I didn't take a lot of it in like how I have now. But then I read it again a few months later, and right towards the end of reading it for the second time is when I took my Shahada. It was a really tough day at work. I just got back at about 10 p.m. back home, and I was super stressed. I just did my thing where I just opened the Quran, started reading, and I read for like a long time. And I only knew one other Muslim, and it was someone who had commented on an Instagram post. By then I'd broken up with my girlfriend, and because of my personal beliefs, I believe that you shouldn't have contact with an ex.
So did you lose contact after you reverted, or
after? So we broke up because her dad was not happy with her marrying someone who wasn't British. She never told her dad that I wasn't Muslim. She just told him that he was a British guy, like a white British guy. And her dad was like, that's not happening. I'm not going to allow you to do that. And the option was stay with her, but her dad would disown her, or we'd have to sort of put a cut to the relationship. And we did. I said, well, we both agreed that it would be stupid trying to hold on to a relationship that we knew would have an ending at some point. So we cut it off. And because of my beliefs, I don't think it's a good idea to stick around, be friends with someone who you've had a relationship with. I think it's a dangerous thing to do. So I cut off contact. And after 3 months is when I took my Shahada. Hadn't spoken to her at all. I didn't have any Muslim friends around me. And there was only one person who I'd messaged a few times on Instagram and DM'd and spoke to her, or whenever I struggled with some page of the Quran, I'd speak to her and she would help me. At this point, I wasn't 100% sure if like you're even allowed to be friends with a woman, or even if we were friends, I'd just DM her because I needed some information and had nowhere else to go. And then, yeah, that evening on the 14th of December, when I got home, I was super stressed, opened the Quran, started reading it. And after about an hour or two, I just called her up and said, look, I want to take my Shahada. And at 11 p.m., I said the Shahada.
Was it on phone or?
Yeah, on phone, by myself in my bedroom.
Wow. Yeah. So what is it like? You know, for us, it's different. We've grown up with Islam, being a Muslim. That's the only thing that we know.
Yeah.
What's it like for you to come from a completely opposite direction and coming into something that you know potentially you can get sucked in, and you still went ahead with it?
Yeah.
Like chapter by chapter, you've listened to the audio version of the Quran. Like, what did you like? Did you see like it was like in sync? It was going in a flow. It was going in a rhythm. What hit you the most?
It was all like, for me, it was just overwhelming surprises. So the first one was the surprise that it wasn't an oppressive religion. And then a lot of the chapters in the Quran that I didn't understand, and I thought, that sounds a bit weird. I Googled it and I listened to speakers, and I realized, it's actually not as oppressive at all. It's not even oppressive. It just makes sense. And then it was the realization that a lot of the values that Muslims have, I had beforehand. I didn't drink alcohol, or when I did, it was very rarely. And I was the one who would convince all my friends to stop drinking alcohol. I hated going on nights out, and I'd only go on nights out if all of my other friends were doing so, and I didn't have an option to hang out with them apart from going on a night out. And all of these values I already had. I only dated to marry. I never would casual date someone. And as I read the Quran, I started realizing all of these values that I already had, that I believed were very good values to have. I just kept on discovering them in the Quran as time went. And it was more of a surprise. Every time I read something, it was like, oh, wow, I had no idea this was in the religion. This was part of the religion. And over time, it was the first step was realizing this isn't an oppressive one. The oppressive religion. The second one was trying to convince myself that there may actually be a God. And the way I did that was with dua, actually. I made a lot of dua. And it was basically, I think they call it hidayah, where you ask for guidance. And at this point, not even a millimeter of belief. I didn't believe at all. And this was like probably a month or two before I reverted to Islam. I started asking for just Allah for stuff, God for stuff, and some of it was stupid, unrealistic, didn't make any sense, and I just do it. And then I wouldn't notice it happened until like 2-3 weeks after it happened. I just suddenly click on and think, oh, that was great that thing happened. And then I realized it was a dua I made. And at this point, I wasn't praying. I only prayed once, and I really butchered it up. The first time every revert prays is not going to be okay. Like, it's okay. It's good that you're praying, but it's not the correct way to pray, if that makes sense. You're never going to get it right your first time. But yeah, I thought my dua is never going to come true because of a few reasons. First of all, I have barely any belief. Like, my only belief is waiting for something to happen, and then I might believe, if that makes sense. And then I wasn't a practicing Muslim, or wasn't even a Muslim at all at this point. And I just kept on making dua. And then a few of them came true. And then I made more dua, and a few came true. And to be honest, I did rush my shahada. And I think at that time I was teetering on the edge. I was like, I really do like everything that's in this book, but I'm still struggling to believe. And that's because of how ingrained, like for 15 years, I'd really strongly believed that there was not a God. And that is something that every atheist, it's the biggest struggle for an atheist to go from an atheist to a Muslim. The biggest struggle is actually believing that there is a God, because you got it so ingrained in your head that there isn't. And it took me, when I took my shahada, I was mostly on the side of belief. And some days I'll be like, there's no doubt. But then other days something would happen and I go, why would this happen? Like, if there was a God, this wouldn't happen. A lot of the Palestine stuff, for example, like, I'd think if there was a God, why is this happening to the Palestinians? It didn't
So
make
what's
sense.
your conclusion now? With all of that happening,
So there was,
why would God do it?
there was one, that's still something I'm trying to figure out. Funny enough. I think it was the strength of the du'as I made. I remember there was this one day I went to the mosque and I was feeling horrible that day. I was already Muslim. This was probably 2 months after taking my shahada, maybe 3. And I was just feeling really horrible. I was having a lot of doubt, and I thought, it's Friday, I'm going to go to mosque, I'm going to do Jummah. And I'd always get overwhelmed because I was freshly into Islam, praying with hundreds of Muslims either side of me in a big mosque in Cambridge. And I just sit there, listen to the khutbah, really distracted, just be thinking, what is happening with my life? Like, what am I doing? Just really doubting everything. And then as I walked out of the mosque that day, a guy called Ish stopped me, a social media guy who has a cat called Fifi.
Ish everything.
Ish everything, yeah.
Shout out.
Yeah. He stopped me outside and I was like, what the hell are you doing in the Cambridge Central Mosque? Like, aren't you from London? And he was like, I just thought I'd come and see a friend. By the way, I've got a Ramadan gift for you because it's just before Ramadan. And I was like, okay, it's a bit weird. And he said, come with me to my car. And at that moment, I was thinking, this is like the sketchiest thing I've ever done. I'm walking down a quiet street in Cambridge with like 3 guys taking me just down this dead end street. And I was like really cautious, thinking there's no way a social media person that's that big would do something dodgy. And then he opened his door and he pulled out a sign that said, you're going to Umrah. And he gifted me a trip to Umrah on the day I'd most doubted Islam
way.
ever. And I couldn't believe it. And I thought, this is just a joke. It's a prank. And I was in the back of my head, I was just trying to deny it as much as I could. And then,
Did he know that you're coming to Cambridge?
Yeah, so I sort of mentioned it on my story that I was going to Cambridge because on Instagram, because I knew a few people in Cambridge, and every time I mentioned it, would hang out for lunch after Jummah or something. So I'm guessing he just had an eye on my story. And
Wow,
yeah,
amazing.
the day I most doubted reverting to Islam, just because I'd had a terrible week, and it was another thing like, why would God make me do this? I'm trying so hard. And then obviously I got gifted the Umrah. And that's probably the day when everything, most of my doubts got completely shut down. And I was like, okay, there's borderline any doubt now. And then when it all got shut down was when I was stood in front of the Kaaba, when I first saw the Kaaba. And I was like, this is the most unreal thing. My first thought was, I do not deserve to be stood in front of the Kaaba 4 months after taking my Shahada and 6 months after actually believing there might be a God. I was stood in front of the Kaaba with like obviously hundreds of thousands of Muslims around me circulating around it. I was like, this is just the most unreal situation of my life. The biggest change in my life ever within 4 months.
Wow, that change, I just can't imagine what it's like for someone who reverted to Islam, taking up a complete different way of life, in fact, opposite way of life.
Yeah.
And then now adjusting. I mean, I was having trouble, getting used to the idea that I bought a wrong IKEA bed, and what am I going to do about it? Now imagine, changing your life. It's like from this to this?
Every day I'd wake up and think, what am I doing? Like, this is such a big choice, such a big decision to make. I'd wake up and think, this is the craziest thing. And I'd have to almost put aside my bad thoughts and just think, believe, just trust the process. It'll be fine.
Did you ever think, you know what, let me just go back to how I was?
There were many thoughts. That Friday was one of the things where I thought, this is just too much. I'd rather just like keep quiet and not tell anyone that I've reverted, and hopefully people will forget. And there's been a few occasions, but like, I think the important thing is that every revert, or most reverts, I know some who would like just get it straight away from the get-go, but especially if you go from atheist, the amount of doubt you get is insane. And I think that doubt is going to happen every single day, and you really do just need to trust.
What's life like? Your family structure, and maybe your parents, your brothers, your sisters. What are they like? Are they also atheists, or do they believe in something? And when they found out that you have effectively abandoned their way of life, what was the reaction?
This is an interesting one because at the age of 11, I moved to Peru with my mum and my sister and my brother. And I left, I didn't have a choice, but I had to leave my dad behind in the UK. And then at the age of 18, I was blocked in Peru. I wasn't allowed to leave the country.
Why?
And because my mum put a block on me. She had reported, it's a crazy story. She had taken my dad to court to get custody of us children. And at the age of 11, she won the court case and took us 3 to Peru. And that was like a major big change in our lives because, 3 English children who had grown up in England, born in Cambridge, suddenly to be taken to the opposite side of the world, to be speaking in a country that speaks a completely different language to yours that you don't really know any of, suddenly put into a school where everyone's speaking a different language. On top of that, in the UK, there's not where I studied, there wasn't a strong push for religion. Like, we sung all the religious, Christian songs in school, but there wasn't like a push to believe it. Whereas suddenly I was in a Catholic school where there'd be like sermons or whatever you call it every Monday, and it was really intense, really, really intense, especially for kids. And like, my sister and brother had the same exact experience. Just the craziest change in your life you could ever expect. And then, whilst I was there at the age of 14, I really wanted to come back to the UK. I just didn't fit in at all in Peru. So on one of my trips back to the UK, which the court, when my mum won custody, said if you take them to Peru, they have to come back once a year. On one of my trips back to the UK, I refused to get on the plane. I said, I'm not getting back on. And my mum flew me to the UK and got the police to borderline force me onto the plane because she had custody. I couldn't say no, really. So I had to fly back. And then from that day, I wasn't allowed back into the UK. And my mum had, in Peru, filed a case against my dad saying he's a dangerous guy. He's not allowed to take his kids back to the UK. And because part of that court case meant I wasn't allowed to leave the country. So I was stuck in Peru from the age of 14, roughly 13, I think. From the age of 13 all the way up until I was 18, I wasn't allowed to leave the country at all. So yeah, going to Peru was just like, as a kid, no one wants their lives to change. And if you're a parent, I'm gonna look at the camera. If you are a parent, don't change your kids' lives like this. It's not a good idea. But yeah.
Wow, this is a lot to take in just like 2 minutes, man. What you just landed on me is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, we're talking about a revert brother and what's life like being before and after, but this is a completely new dimension to the whole story.
I've even forgot the question. Like, what was
life like?
My parents' reaction.
Yeah. So, okay, before we get to that, how did you come back?
So at the age of 15, my dad flew to Peru, and me and my dad together took my mum to court to get this block removed so I could fly back for my dad. And for 3 months straight, every single day, we had to travel for 2 hours on a bus to get to the court, sit outside the court and just try and get the judge's attention and tell them, please, hurry up, hurry up. And after 3 months straight, we got the papers saying that I could go back. Went to the Spanish embassy, because I have a Spanish passport. Went to the Spanish embassy, tried to get my passport out, and they said these aren't the correct papers. You need the court to issue these other papers. So we went back to the court, and the court said, you're not allowed, like, we can't give you these papers. It's too much of a risk on us. So from that age, I was completely blocked. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't leave the country at all. And my dad, had the risk of, if he ever went into Peru again, my mum would put a court case on him again and he'd be stuck in Peru. So he
No
wasn't allowed to go.
way.
He
That is
couldn't really
mad.
go to Peru and I couldn't go to the UK. So yeah, that happened. I think the court case officially finished and we got the documents when I was about 15 and a half, roughly. So for 2.5 years, I'd left my mum's house by this point. I was living basically by myself. And for 2 years, from the age of 16 roughly to 18, I was just living in basically a student dorm there, but it's very common out there for someone to just live in a room. And would just borderline just wait every single day for the day I could come back to the UK. And then the day
Almost
I was 18.
like a prison. You're not
Sort
in a
of.
prison, but you are kind
There's
of
a bit
in
more freedom, but
Yeah.
yeah. And obviously for my dad, it was, I don't know if you know a lot about Peru, but it's a third world country. It can be fairly
Yeah.
dangerous. There used to be a lot of terrorism like inside
I've got
the
a
borders.
colleague who is from Peru, and we have good
Yeah.
conversations. And
Yeah. It
he's a
goes up
nice
and
guy,
down.
but from what I understand, like the third world and
It's sort
they've
of
got-
pushed in, like the culture there is just, it's got amazing culture, but in the cities, everyone's, and I feel like this happens all over the world, when you get to a certain level, everyone gets into a panic mode and a struggle mode and the hustle mode. And a lot of those people end up going to theft and to,
Damn.
certain illegal things. So
Damn.
there's a big illegal sort of like theft and drugs.
Was your dad violent though?
Well, no, he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. All of my friends just loved him so much and still love him. Like as a kid, I would do sleepovers and everyone would want to come to our house because my dad was like, yeah, sure, here's your room, just do whatever you want. And he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Literally the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Everyone who meets my dad is just like, he's just a lovely fella. Yeah,
Wow.
it's just-
And
my mum really wanted us kids to go with her.
do you ever speak to your mum?
I haven't spoken to her in 6.5 years. No.
And does she ever try and reach out to you?
She did for the first few years, and she tries to contact my sister a lot, but she's, to put it nicely, she's a dangerous person to contact because you can't have, she's been diagnosed with narcissist. She's a narcissist. I don't know what the word is in English, narcissistic behavior, whatever, which in short means it's very difficult to have a conversation, like to try and resolve problems with her because she cannot believe that she is the problem. And that can cause a lot of issues. So the last few times I tried to speak to her was once when my sister was still out in Peru and I was probably about 20 years old. My sister was having a lot of issues with her. And I called my mum and I said, look, you need to stop being so aggressive towards, my sister. She deserves respect, she deserves peace, and you shouldn't be doing this stuff to my sister. And that was the last time I ever spoke to her, I think, on the phone where I rang
Does
her.
she know that you've reverted to Islam?
I don't think she knows. My grandmother in Peru doesn't know. I'd never told my dad, but I'm guessing when I told him, oh yeah,
But you're on
going to-"
socials.
Yeah, but none of them are. That's the thing.
Oh,
Like,
they're not.
not even my sister. My sister only goes onto YouTube. Like she doesn't have an Instagram.
So
doesn't
where
have
is
Facebook.
your sister now? Is she in Peru or is
She's
she
in the UK now. When she was 18, we brought her over as well. Got her, luckily got her to study a bit more because I left school when I was 14 and she left school when she was, I think, 15 because of the situation out there. While she was out there, we got her away from my mum towards the end and then got her into a school where she could sort of finish her education. And now she's back in the UK and safe is what I say.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Wow, what a roller coaster journey, man.
Yeah.
And
It's
almost alone,
Yeah.
a lot of it. Because I remember when we migrated to this country, we
Yeah.
came as a family.
Yeah. How old
And
were
that
you?
was a huge change for me.
Yeah. At what age did you come?
11.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, but what you're telling me is something else.
Yeah.
And then now from there to coming into Islam, which is completely something different. Did you feel like you become brave, like to make decisions, going through all the things that you've been through, all the ups and downs?
It's definitely made me more logical, if that makes sense. So a lot of people just jump into stuff without even thinking about it. They'll read a book and they'll go like Atomic Habits and they're now like, I'm a genius on how to manage your habits. Or they'll read some book on business and they go, I'm a businessman now. Whereas I'd really, really assess everything I'm doing. And the same thing was with Islam. I'd Google contradictions in the Quran and then Google the contradictions, try and see if there's resolution. And every single one I found a resolution. And then I'd purposely go out of my way to find bad things in Islam and then find the answers for them before I reverted. So I was really logical about it. And the belief in God was something that I thought, so the typical atheist argument is, how did the universe start? And we know it was the Big Bang. And that is, I believe it's still a theory. But you theoretically can see where the Big Bang started. And that's like something you'll look at in other religions. It doesn't make sense. The Big Bang shouldn't exist. Where in Islam, it doesn't refute it, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of research I did and put into it. And as an atheist, the question was, how did the universe start? And then how did the Big Bang start? Because the Big Bang obviously wasn't the beginning. There was something before that. And my answer was, we don't know. So it's best not to assume. And that was my belief in why there's no God. It's best not to assume there's a God. And then after reading the Quran and reading the story of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and trying to research it, it made so much sense. And everything started to come together. And the answers for almost any question I had, I could find in the Quran, or if not in the Quran, I could find in the life of the Prophet or something. I'd find the answer in Islam.
You know, like I think, you know, with so first world countries are very well administered countries. You know, they think everything through. There's risk assessments. There's everything has a risk assessment in this country.
Yeah.
But I just find it so strange. It's those same people that do risk assessment to everything else apart from their own life. Like they don't question, like, what if something is actually there?
Yeah.
Should I not just pray and just do what we... Because either way, if there's nothing, then there's nothing. But if there is something, boy, like, I'm not prepared.
Yeah, well, I think that's another argument a lot of religious people make. Like, why don't you just believe regardless? And the issue is it's not as easy as just saying that. You can't believe in something without actual evidence or proof of it. It's really difficult to believe in something without anyone actually showing you the evidence for it. So, yeah, I think the hardest thing for these people to do, like, my first time I prayed, after I prayed, I was like, that was the silliest thing I've ever done. When I, like, in a brutally honest way, I was just putting my, like, in a rude way, I was putting my face on the ground. I'd never done this before. I was just like talking to what at the time was for me something that was borderline imaginary. It's the silliest thing you'll ever do. But then the more you do it, the better your life gets. And it's like running. You go for a run and your legs hurt. It sucks. Your thighs are hurting. Your hips are hurting. The next day you wake up and it sucks even more. It's the worst thing ever. But then you keep it up. And then after a month, you suddenly realize this is great. I can actually run twice as much as I could. And it's similar with Islam. You start praying, and especially as an atheist who doesn't believe in God. The first time I prayed, I was still theoretically an atheist. And life got better after a few times. And the situation at the time where I was praying, because I was in a bit of a tough situation, I thought, I'm just going to pray and see what it does. It got better. And it's the same thing. The more you do it, the better it gets. And now there's still times where 5 daily prayers is tough. And when I first saw it, I was thinking 5 daily prayers is crazy. No Muslim prays 5 times a day. But then I realized almost all of the Muslims I know pray 5 times a day. Most of them.
Alhamdulillah. So you started a, social media journey platform, or platform where you share your journey about becoming a revert, and educating perhaps other people who are, on the borderline, on the fence, not sure if this is for them. Yeah. What would you tell, like, being a brown person and a Muslim person, and who's apparently, I mean, with my looks, you can see I'm a Muslim person. And that could raise some defenses with someone who's maybe atheist, someone who doesn't believe in God, someone who believes in other religions. Yeah. How can I lower this defense from them? What can I do, say, as a brown, religious-looking, beardy man?
I think you've got an unfair disadvantage, because the way you look, naturally people are going to look at you and assume a certain thing. Yeah. So someone who's a white Brit who goes to the pub every weekend, who loves football and shouts at the TV screen, if you try and tell them, hey man, you should consider Islam, they're going to hate you naturally. And I think that's the power of a revert, someone who looks like me. It is blatant racism, but it is true. Someone who looks like me, if I approach them, their whole mindset towards it would be very different. And that's an issue that I think a lot of born Muslims have. They know Islam is right and they know what they're doing is right. But if they were to approach someone who does not believe and try and convince them, they're going to be on the defensive. So you have an unfair disadvantage there, and I have an unfair advantage, if that makes sense. The number one piece of advice I give every single Muslim I meet, if they want their friends to convert, or they want their family to see what they're doing and try and consider Islam, just be as practicing as you can. Pray your 5 daily prayers, read the Quran, be a better person, be a better Muslim. naturally people are going to see that and think, wow, there's something there. But if you try and talk them into it, if you try and, preach to them, it's never going to work. It's never going to work.
Wow.
It may work, but
So
yeah.
Should there be not a moment where you kind of trigger that thought in them? Because you can leave it to chances where they observe and think, oh, you know what, this is really good. This guy is really nice and, kind and, humble and, he's a good citizen of the country.
Yeah.
But can you not trigger certain thinking, like for them to think in a certain way?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the thing, if you do it too purposely and if you make it too pushy, people's natural response is going to be defensive.
How can I do it indirectly?
Indirectly, it's just be practicing and then
Okay.
invite them to an Islamic restaurant maybe, and you can just mention, oh yeah, this meat is halal, and then they may ask, what makes meat halal? And just stuff like that, just indirect things. Like for my friends during Ramadan, they both considered converting to Islam. My two closest friends, one's they're out Catholic, and the other is sort of hovering on the edge of everything. He believes there's a God, but doesn't know what to believe. Both of them during Ramadan, they saw me practicing 5 times a day. They saw me waking up at 3 a.m. to, have as much food as I could, and then not eating or drinking all day. And they would just look at me and go, this is insane. The discipline that this person has because of his religion is crazy. And that naturally got them questioning and asking questions. And then I'd invite them to the mosque, and they'd come into the mosque in Cambridge and would just sit there for an hour and just relax. And they'd meet other Muslims and they'd see how nice everyone else is there. So I feel like if you are just practicing, your life will revolve around Islam. And if they are around you enough, they will see all of this and they'll have questions and they'll ask you.
So what do you see as a revert, relatively new? What do you see the reality is on the ground of the existing Muslim ummah in this country? What are we doing and what are they doing?
I think there's two issues. There's one where a lot of Muslims naturally believe that you are a Muslim, you are perfect in a sense. I know not a lot of people believe that, but they believe you're a Muslim, you're a better person. Unfortunately, not all Muslims are good. And I think in the UK, the issue is a lot of the crimes that are committed by people, even if 1% of them were committed by Muslims, that's going to be the thing that's caught up. That's going to be the thing that's brought up, the fact that they are Muslims. And once again, it's a disadvantage that we have. And it just means that we have to be even more practicing. We really have to catch up. Like if our friend's doing something bad, we have to, tell them, by the way, what you're doing is not great. And I think the biggest way to convince them that what they're doing is not great is to tell them, if that guy who is a Christian sees you doing this and knows that you're a Muslim, they're going to believe that your actions are Islamic actions. And that is tarnishing every Muslim's position. Like as a Muslim, you want to be as great as you can around non-Muslims, as Islamic as possible. But the issue is you will do bad behaviors. Eventually everyone sins. And if someone who's not a Muslim sees you doing that, they'll relate it to Islam, which isn't the truth.
If you had the ability to address all the UK Muslims, brown, black, white, every race you can imagine, men and women, what would you tell each groups? Like, what would you tell men and what would you tell women, like Muslim men and women?
That's a tough question.
Like if you could guide them, like, look, do this, do that. What would you tell them that is wrong, that you see wrong, and you would like for them to correct?
The thing is, everyone's sins are different, and everyone.
No, just speak broadly. Like, say you're speaking to the brothers now.
Okay,
Muslim brothers. What's our duty?
Yeah, I'd say to every Muslim in the UK, your actions are what other people are going to judge Islam based off of. So if you do bad things, regardless of whether it's Islamic or not, every non-Muslim is going to see you and say that is Islam. So every action you do, think about what you do, because that single action might be the difference between someone converting to Islam and someone believing it's a bad religion.
And do you think people are constantly watching exactly what you're doing, every movement that you're making? Say if I'm riding on a bus, are people watching me? Like, are they paying attention to this brown man?
Yeah. So if you are, for example, riding on a bus and you get on and you talk to the driver, for example, and you're a bit rude to him, if you have a hijab or if you're a brown man with a beard, they're going to think that's an Islamic way of thinking. That's because he's Muslim, he's doing that. And if you're a white guy and you do similar, they're just going to think, oh, it's just a hooligan. They'll never relate it to Christianity or anything else. So that's the issue. Every tiny action you do, how polite you are to people, how you may let someone through when you're opening a door or something, all of that in the UK, it's naturally, and I know this because I was like this, you'll see them, and if they are brown or if they have a hijab or if there's something that relates them to Islam, you'll think that is just Muslims. That's just how Muslims are.
So it's not this person is Bangladeshi or Indian or Pakistani. They're actually Muslims. Like they're referred to with their religion.
Quite a lot, yeah. And you'll see that a lot. Like, for example, a lot of the news that comes out, if it's a migrant, the natural reaction from people who are British will be, it's a Muslim who's doing this. It's Muslims who are the problem. Like the biggest reaction on lately has, because due to these riots and stuff, has been, we don't like Muslims. A lot of these migrants aren't even Muslim, but they're relating it to Islam. And that's a big issue in the UK.
Unfair disadvantage for these people for being unfortunately brown.
Like we're getting pulled into it. And it's the best thing ever, because I'm a white British guy whose ancestors have fought in all the wars to defend England, and they can't stand it when I say Islam isn't the problem, because in their mind Islam is the problem.
So you'd think it's a lot of it is propaganda.
Yeah.
And who are the culprits? Media or the masterminds of atheism, or is it just as a society? What is it? Who's kind of creating this issue? This knowledge gap or in fact misinformation?
I don't know. First of all, I don't know. But if I was to assume, there's a few reasons. First of all, Britain 50 years ago was very English, very Catholic. And now it's quite obviously not. You walk down London and you won't see it's purely British. You obviously see people of every race. And I think the issue is people are relating the bad things to immigrants, because the country has gone down lately. And naturally, more non-British people are in the country, and they relate it to that. And there's two sides of it. You can't dispute that some immigrants aren't great, but at the same time, it's not okay to blame every person who's not English to be the problem, because a lot of the problems are caused by British. That's a very good question you've asked. Very good question you've asked.
I would have assumed it's the media. Maybe they're afraid of, people getting sucked into the power of Quran and, the knowledge of Quran or the information that's in the Quran.
Yeah, but why? That's the thing.
Why are they? That's what I think. I think it's the media.
Yeah.
They're so afraid. But my question was, why are they afraid?
That's always my question as well, because there must be they're not just going to do it because we're Muslim. Like there's a deeper reason to it, and it's hard to know. Like I don't know. That's my answer. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know.
So did you find a person to marry then in the end, or are you still looking?
So before I dated that person, I had a business and it was doing fairly well, and I still own that business.
What is it?
It's video production.
Okay.
For recruitment companies, and I was very, very strict on the idea of I need to make this succeed. And once I make it succeed, the rest of my life is going to be fine. And I would blatantly reject every woman who would come close to me. Like my friends would say, you've got a problem because you're actually hurting women because you don't want to be with them.
So you thought just keeping them away
I was so blocked off.
Is the good thing to make sure you attain your success.
Yes, so blocked off. And it got ridiculous sometimes. I was so blocked off to women. And then I met this woman, and she was the first person that I guess you could say got through the
barricade. How? Obviously she's a Muslim as well, completely opposite to you.
Maybe it was the Islamic traits, because I believed that some of the traits that I wanted, it was borderline impossible to find in a woman, and a lot of her traits, of those traits that I seeked, she had.
Give me an example.
Didn't believe men and women could truly be friends, if that's a sense. She had some male friends, but it wasn't as strict as some of the UK people, I guess you could say. Very much on the side of marriage rather than casual dating. Very protective of who she spends her time with and who she dates, if that makes sense. Theoretically.
So she had self-respect. She had some self-worth.
A lot more self-respect than the average Brit. And now, obviously, I discovered Islam. That was one of the biggest things. I thought I was alone in thinking that these were good traits, but then I discovered Islam, and I discovered there's 2 billion other people in the world that think the same. But at the time, I'd never really met a Muslim, and I'd never really spent time with one. And I spent time with her, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. She's such a great person, and all of these great traits she just has. And
so what happened to her? Did you say, look, I'm reverted, or is it still the father issue where he's saying no, it's not?
I don't think it had anything to do with Islam, to be honest, because. Yeah, I told her I'm putting a lot of effort into learning the religion and stuff, and we'll see how it works. she never told her dad that I was a Muslim. She only told her dad that I was English, I believe, and that's why he was hard no.
But if he realized that you became a Muslim, or if you are going to become a Muslim, do you think he would have had a lot more lenient stance on this situation?
I don't think so, because unfortunately culture in certain countries, so he was Saudi, for example, is so embedded that you want your children to marry someone who is from Saudi Arabia, and you don't want them to marry someone else, if that makes sense. And I think it's purely down to that. And we did talk about this a lot, and we said, what if I just said I was a Muslim for now, just to get away with it, which I know isn't the greatest thing to say. But that wasn't like the problem. It was the problem that culture was prioritized over Islam. Because in Islam, you're not really supposed to, you're not supposed to judge someone based on where they're from or what color their skin is or anything. There's a verse in the Quran that says you're not supposed to.
I guess the father was looking at the compatibility issue. Maybe he was foreseeing the future, like, his grandchildren, what he envisions them to be or something. Well, God knows what he was thinking.
I actually don't blame him that much, because the average Brit, think of British culture as like pure Brits. If you're someone who's born in Britain, it's go to the pub on the weekend, get drunk, have a few pints. You're probably smoking cigarettes. You're probably watching football. When you go to another country, you may be a bit aggressive watching football and leave a mess behind you after the game. That's the world's view on what a Brit is. So I don't actually blame him. What I wish happened was he actually got to meet me.
Okay.
But yeah.
Has she got married? Did she become married? Did she?
I don't even know.
Oh.
I haven't spoken to her in a long time.
Well, if she's watching, I hope she knows that you're reverted and you're still looking to get married, right?
Oh, obviously. I think, it'd be silly for someone not to want to get married. I think that's every man's dream, is to get married.
No, as in like, I just wanted to know, like, you're not engaged or you're not...
Oh, no, not engaged. I've put it off a lot because I'm supposed to be moving to Saudi Arabia soon, and I thought it would be unfair if I got married and suddenly I was like, let's hop off to
Saudi Arabia. I mean, there's an inclination with Saudi Arabia, and
I'll tell you why though. It's not actually because of her, because she's not moving back to Saudi.
I'm not assuming. Don't think I'm assuming, but it's like Saudi Arabia is pulling you somehow.
So the reason I want to go to Saudi Arabia, a few reasons. First of all, Mecca and Medina are there, and obviously after doing Umrah, I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. But then there's also the way the country's advancing. A lot of Muslims don't like this because they see it becoming too westernized. But for me, as someone who was a revert and it's really difficult for me to go from a very British culture straight into a very Islamic culture. And I feel like if I was to move to Medina and I was to move to a country that didn't let women drive or didn't, the hijab was 100% obligatory, that would have been a bit of a struggle for me. Whereas now it's a country that is much more free for both people. Like, the rights for women are more than the rights for men, I believe, right now. Like, if you're a woman, you have your own section in a restaurant. Men just get their little peasant section, I guess. But I think it's the growth of Saudi Arabia and the fact that Mecca, Medina are there and everything that's happening there just makes
What are you going to be doing in Saudi Arabia?
Managing a podcast, funny enough.
Amazing. Is it for the government or?
No, I'm not really allowed to say too much now, but it's just, a fairly big-sized podcast in Saudi Arabia.
Make sure you invite me as a guest.
100%.
So where are you going to be living in Saudi?
Jeddah, hopefully.
Amazing. Before Umrah, visa was like restricted to the Mecca and Medina.
Yeah.
Now they've turned into a tourist visa.
Yeah.
So I went to Saudi, I think about a year ago, and I was just roaming around, going to different shopping malls, because obviously our business is to do with shopping malls. So I was exploring different shopping centers. And I was like, wow, like I felt a bit wrong. Like, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I supposed to be roaming around in Saudi Arabia? And it felt so strange for me, but it felt so good as well at the same time.
Yeah.
I was taking an Uber and going to different malls and chilling and relaxing. And
for me, it was like 10 times worse because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. Like, I didn't even know an ihram existed 3 months before I went to Saudi.
Which
is so funny. So I was in the middle of nowhere. On the plane, I was thinking, I really need a wee. Will that ruin my whole Umrah and everything? And I remember telling the person next to me who was also doing Umrah, I was saying, can I wee when I'm in the ihram? And he was like, yeah, go for it. And I did wudu in the plane, which is the most uncomfortable thing. But I know what you mean. And I'd recommend every Muslim who goes to do Umrah, spend some time just visiting the country if you can and just enjoy it.
It's nice. I mean, there's some amazing shopping destinations. Even in Medina, there's a big shopping center. I think it's Sinoni or something.
The clock tower as well. It's the biggest shopping center I've ever been to. It's crazy.
It's amazing. But I was watching something last night and it just popped up on my YouTube feed and it was talking about NEOM being like a scam project or something. Do you think that, or maybe you're not allowed to talk now because of
I don't know.
your
I don't
future?
mind talking on it. Like if I'm
What
not,
do you think of NEOM?
I think NEOM's awesome. I'm a strong believer in being so optimistic that other people think you're crazy. And I think NEOM's just that, but in such a big sense because there's a whole country doing it. There's actually 3 mega project sort of companies out there. NEOM is just the one that's the most public. There's one, NEOM, what NEOM does is it announces what it's going to do.
Okay.
And then it tries to do it. And for the most part, it succeeds in doing them. Like the line is already being built now. Then some of the others, one of them doesn't announce what it's doing. It just does it. And then suddenly you'll see a massive neighborhood of the most incredible buildings pop up in Riyadh or something.
That's true.
But no one hears about that because they don't make a big deal of it.
Yeah.
They don't announce it. Only really Saudis who are involved in it will know. But I think the mega projects that are happening in Saudi is borderline like on the brink of humans' capabilities. You look at the line, a city that's in the middle of a desert that is net zero, eco-friendly, whatever, zero carbon footprint. It's the craziest thing. No one could ever even, like if you tried to do that in the UK, you'd get
It's like
kicked out.
movies, like fiction. Like
It
you know,
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's someone had
imaginary movies. Is
Yeah.
it non-fiction or fiction? I always get confused
It's like
with
you
those.
said to a kid, what would you want to do with this city? You've got £10 billion.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want to make a line. And they're like, all right, let's see how we can make it work. And it works. And they do it. And that's the craziest thing. I think NEOM's awesome, what it's doing.
Yeah,
love it.
sounds exciting.
Yeah.
I do want to visit this place called Alula. Like I've seen
Yeah.
it pop up on my feed a lot, and looks very
Yeah.
interesting because it's so authentic and natural.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Alula, but I'd love to go. The issue is, I feel like Alula's so small because I only see like the same photo of like, the Chrome building, like the mirror building that
Wow.
Cristiano Ronaldo's been to. I don't
Yeah.
really know a lot about it.
There's one thing I do want to do, and I wish Saudis would permit me to do it. You know, to do a excursion based using a helicopter and following the prophetic, you know, that hijrah,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
journey, low flying, you know, and just
Yeah.
going, you know, following the path.
Well, that might happen soon because I know Saudis introduced flying cars into Hajj now. So if you take Hajj, you can get a flying car
No.
to do the Hajj for you, which is like crazy. Like everywhere else in the world, you think that's obviously not real, but then
Seriously, like, is this
yeah,
true?
yeah, with Saudi Airlines, I believe. So you can now get a flying car to do Hajj, and I think it's meant for people who really struggle with like the whole
Like elderly
process.
and disabled, maybe.
But there's also probably a side that if you're a multi-billionaire, you can just pay a few million and get a
That
flying car
is-
to do.
That is
half a million.
mad. That is mad. Wow.
But yeah, it's crazy.
I
I agree. That I'd rather walk it though if I was to do it.
definitely.
And I know
definitely.
I have a friend, a close friend, who's walking it for the second time, walking the whole Hajj trip. The trip from I believe it's Mecca to Medina.
Now, do you think Saudis are a lot more friendlier with white-skinned people?
I don't really know. I mean, they were with me. If I'd walk down the mall, I'd get stopped 2 or 3 times. People would fix my headgear and like the people would fix my shmekh and everything. And Saudis love to see a Brit in their country, especially in Mecca, Medina. Now you may think the tattoos may put them off a bit, but they just loved it. They were like super embracing of it, super loving. I've never been in a community that's so loving of me, if that makes sense. And I think
Wow.
that's just Muslims in general, but Saudis just take that to another level. They're so hospitable, so hospitable.
Wow.
But I don't know, to be honest, because I haven't experienced it personally.
I mean, we get told. So, you know, in Saudi, I guess the biggest workforce is from I think there's about 2 million something Bangladeshis living in Saudi, and they are generally predominantly doing the lower level jobs. And
That doesn't surprise me though, because if you look at if they could bring some people from a country that they need, I mean, they need people.
yeah,
Obviously the wages and the living costs in those countries are pretty low. So if they can bring people over and give them a bit of a better wage and give them something that they can send back home,
yeah,
those are the 2 countries that make
Yeah.
the most sense. The issue with that is a lot of those people decided to stay in Saudi, but naturally they were on the lower scale because they were brought from, poorer income households.
yeah.
And I feel like that's put a bit of a bad reputation on them, which is a bit annoying. But I think over time that will get fixed because
Inshallah, I do hope so, because there are stories, like even yesterday I was with a friend who's got an office in Riyadh actually. They're a creative agency from London, but they've moved to Riyadh about a year ago.
Yeah.
And he was saying, man, like some of the stuff that we see is heartbreaking, and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, I feel like that happens in the UK as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like you do, like everywhere you go, it's a lot of people do unfortunately.
But at
sort of
least you have
judge
some
from where
rights,
you
innit?
are.
In the UK,
In the
you
UK,
know,
you have some rights. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like in
Yeah.
Saudi, to be completely honest.
I don't want to talk too much and get you into trouble with your
We never know.
future employer or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and block your travel into Saudi Arabia. Tattoos.
Tattoos.
Why do Western people do tattoos? What's this like? What triggers them to do tattoos? Is it
This is so
a
silly.
historical, generational thing, or what is it?
It's just cool. That's the simple answer. It's just cool to have tattoos. Like, you grow up as a kid, and I shouldn't be saying this now as a Muslim, but you see someone who's got tattoos and you're like, wow, that's cool. And that's how I thought.
But we don't see it as a cool thing. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
all about perspective. It's,
Yeah,
it's just
definitely.
crazy.
And I think that goes for everything. That's a good example of how other people may think. You may see tattoos as a bad thing, as like, oh my God, he's got tattoos, to stay away from him. Here in the UK, if you're young and you have tattoos, it's like, oh, is he a cool person? I think most people do it because they want to stand out and look cool. But to be honest, there's no reason to get tattoos. It's a silly thing to do. Yeah.
Can you rub off tattoos?
No.
No, never.
You can get laser, like I can laser these off, but laser depends on your skin and stuff and the pigment of the tattoo. So these may never come off. I've probably got these for
Wow,
life.
That is
I may even be buried
crazy.
with these,
Crazy.
which a lot of Muslims look at me and
And
say,
what do
"Wow."
Muslims think of these? Like when they see, is there a negative stigma around
There's actually the opposite.
reverts with tattoos?
There's the opposite, because I think tattoos, for the most part, are a sign that you're a revert, and naturally Muslims just love reverts.
Okay.
I've come to discover. So when I first went to the mosque, I was so worried about showing my tattoos. I had a jacket on and I was boiling, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take my jacket off, but I'd have to be showing my tattoos, and I was so worried. No one said a thing. Like, after a few months of going to a mosque frequently, you get some people like mentioning it, but it'd always be in like good terms, like, oh, what does that tattoo mean, or something like that. They'd just be inquisitive. And fair enough, you know, they've never really hung out with someone who's got tattoos. So the first person they see, they want to ask, well, why do you get tattoos and stuff? But in Islam, I think, especially nowadays, you don't get judged for stuff like that. Maybe, yeah, if you've got some tattoos on your face or something,
Yeah.
people are going to judge you, but it's not as bad as I think a lot of reverts think it is.
Wow,
Tattoos
that's
are fine in Islam.
tattoos. I always
long as you said
found
your
it
shahada.
interesting. I always found it interesting, and I was inquisitive as well. And I wish I could ask people, but now I guess I just got to ask you. Amazing.
Yeah.
So,
What is interesting is a lot of born Muslims have so many more questions than English people. 'Cause
yeah.
they've never been around someone who's got tattoos. So the second they see it, they ask all these questions. And it's the same for me. Like, I have friends who are born Muslims who have never tasted alcohol, and their first question is, what does alcohol do? And I've never actually thought about having to explain this to someone. I thought everyone would have known what alcohol does, but yeah.
So, what's your outlet at the moment? What do you do? Like when you get stressed, like what is it that you do to calm yourself down? Obviously, we pray, we do durood and all of that. But
Yeah.
in terms of activities, maybe going out or chilling out, I mean, what's your chilling out? What does it look like?
I don't really chill out. I just work all the time. And I suppose the praying makes life so much more relaxing in general. So if before I'd constantly be stressed at a certain level, the fact that I simply pray means it's so difficult for me to genuinely get stressed like I would before. So that's like a way to just calm you down to a really nice grounded level. And if you are stressed, the next time you pray, which will be in a few hours, or even then if you want to, you can relax yourself immediately, and it's the best thing ever.
Do you go out with your boys? Like
yeah,
the
I'm
old
really
days
into
or
cars. I'm really into cars, so I spend a lot of time. I used to drift a lot, and I used to build race cars for fun.
Mate, serious?
Yeah.
What's your favorite car?
Probably at the moment a Koenigsegg, which is the most unrealistic car because it's like £4 million. But
What is it, like modified car?
No,
or something?
Koenigsegg's like the hyper mega car. It's like
I've never heard of
the
this
number
car.
one. Yeah, it's like Bugatti.
Yeah.
It's Bugatti's direct competitor, and they're better than Bugatti.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, some people hate me for saying that, but they are better.
No way.
Yeah, that's my favorite car.
So you're way past Lambo and Ferrari and Aston Martins and
I mean, I like them. There's nothing bad about a Lambo. I feel like Lambo's got this taboo now because the Lambos that come
it's
out
like a
nowadays,
show-offy car.
they're just a robot. Anyone can, like your grandmother or anyone's grandmother could just get in a Lambo and drive it, and you'll probably be fine. Whereas the older Lambos, they're scary to drive. Yeah, they will kill you if you push it too much. So
Wow.
I like older Lambos. The new Lambos are a bit too easy.
So you're more into like the actual mechanics, like, you know,
Yeah.
how a car drives
Yeah.
and
My dad-
without the computers and stuff.
My dad almost kicked me out because I was swapping the engine of my car on his driveway and I was getting oil everywhere. And at like midwinter, -5 degrees, I was just out in my driveway just
So you're a
swapping engines.
mechanic, like you can,
No, I suck at mechanics, but I do it anyways. Yeah, I'm really...
but you can do it.
Yeah, but I'll break something and then I'll ask a friend who is a mechanic to come and help me. But I try.
So my brother's got this Porsche, what is it? 911 is it or something? I don't know.
Probably a 911, yeah.
GT something? GT3?
GT3, that's
Yeah.
a good car.
Yeah.
That's a very good car.
Yeah, and he's more into Porsche and the actual feel of the car
Yeah.
and driving the car.
Yeah, that's
And
not
I'm
me.
more into like the automatic stuff. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want too much. Like, I don't want to control the car. I want the car to
Yeah.
just take care of everything and I just drive.
So that's how you differentiate someone who's trying to show off and someone who loves cars. If they like a manual gearbox, if they like to be involved with the car, they like the actual noise of it rather than just having it loud or something. That's a true petrol head. Those who drive...
Yeah, I think he's petrol head for
yeah.
sure.
If he owns a GT3, he probably is.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
me, I'm not into like I'm not a Porsche kind of person.
Yeah.
I'm probably more
Not
like
everyone
I guess. And now I'm having different thoughts.
A
But
Rolls Royce, an automatic or an automatic
yeah,
Mercedes.
or maybe like if it's got to be a supercar, then it's got to be a Ferrari or something.
Okay,
something.
yeah. Ferraris are annoying to own as well.
Yeah.
They break all the time.
I've for his wedding, I rented this Ferrari SF90.
Yeah, on the SF90, that's
Yeah.
good.
That was sick. That
Yeah,
drive was
they are
sick.
good.
It was
Very
like I didn't have to do much. I just had to press the pedal and it was
Yeah.
just going.
Yeah, I don't like that. Too easy.
Yeah, too
You need
easy.
a challenge.
And that's me. Like, you know, I don't want like. Sometimes I would take a detour because I don't want to steer the steering wheel too many times
Yeah.
going through the inroads.
Yeah.
But obviously, if there's traffic, then yeah.
Yeah. I don't like
Um,
automatics.
So your Learn to Revert channel.
Yeah.
Did you start off with 0 followers or did you have some followers already?
Oh, this is stupid. I made a page which the goal was I'd post the top 1% of my life, and then what I'd do is I'd try and push for that top 1% of my life to be my whole life. So I'm really into watches. I'm into, I shouldn't say this, but I'm into like luxury cigars and stuff, and I love that sort of lifestyle, supercars and stuff. So whenever I'd like borrow my friend's Aston Martin, I'd take a picture in it and just post that on that Instagram. Or whenever I was wearing a nice watch, I'd take a picture and just put it on the Instagram. Now that I'm in London, I've got my Casio on. For safety. But yeah,
Where are you from, by the way?
Cambridge.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I was born in Cambridge.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. I always go down to Cambridge, you know,
Nice. Got a
every
really good
2
mosque.
weeks. Yeah.
Really, really good mosque out there. But,
So 1% of your life on Instagram.
yeah, and I'll show off all the time about everything, anything good. I'd go to a fancy restaurant, boom, picture, put it on my Instagram. And the goal was, if that was the top 1% of my life, eventually that would be all of my life. So I'd always be in the nicest cars. I'd always be in the nicest restaurants. Then when I reverted to Islam, I always had the idea, I wanted to make daily videos on what my life was like as a revert or what experiences I had and just share it with other people. And I probably filmed about 10 other videos before posting one. And I thought, this page that I've currently got, I show a lot of haram stuff. I show cigars. I'm showing off, which in itself isn't a good thing. So I deleted all the posts and posted my first Learn to Revert video after filming 10. And the first Learn to Revert video that I did, I just posted it, went to sleep, woke up to like 5,000 views. And I was like, wow, this is great. Way more than I expected. I expected like 20 views. So then I did the next day. I did the same the next day. And then I did the same again. And then on day 3, I believe, I had 50 followers. And a guy called Joel Sullivan, who is Andrew Tate's best friend, a fellow revert from the UAE, shared my post, followed me and shared my post onto his story, to his like 250,000 followers. And I was like, okay, this is great. And he messaged me and I was like, suddenly I posted for 3 days and I'm talking to these people who I look up to. And I kept on posting. By day 14, I think it was roughly, I did a video every single day. By day 14, I got given the Umrah, I believe. I was walking out the mosque and I think Ish saw my account. I don't know how I got it. I did actually apply to his giveaway. But yeah, on day 14 of posting every single day, I got gifted a trip to Umrah. I reached 10,000 followers really quickly. It was just like overwhelming. And then I was straight into Ramadan as well. During Ramadan, I'd go live every breakfast, every suhoor, and I'd get like a good 15 viewers that I'd chat to all day. And I was like, this is just great. So I just kept on posting every day.
Wow.
Yeah. And the toughest part is I don't know anything, but people think I know stuff. So I get some really tough questions in my DMs and my comments that I don't know. I'm not even 1% of the way onto being like an imam or anything. I'm so
Wow.
low on the knowledge scale, but people think I'm really high because I just post what I actually do know. which isn't a lot.
Amazing, brother Ali, Alistair, aka Ali.
Ali, yeah.
That was quite convenient, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You just had to kind of get rid of certain letters, and then you become Ali.
It just happened. Yeah, it's so funny.
Alhamdulillah. Let's end with a quick fire. I mean, this has been a very, very wonderful discussion and chat, and I would definitely love to continue our conversation offline. Now, what's your favorite? Which country does your favorite dish? Is it Peru or is it England?
Peru's normal dish is a guinea pig that's been sort of deferred and served on a plate that looks like a rat. So I'd definitely say the UK.
Okay. And I think we've already spoken about cars and all that stuff.
Beans on toast.
Beans on toast.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, simplicity of it.
Amazing. And Android or Apple?
Apple, but I use an Android because I don't like the idea of refreshing your phone every 2 years because of lithium batteries.
Yeah, that's so true. You know, I'm coming towards my end of 2 year, and I can see how everything is just deteriorating very quickly.
If you look into it a bit, you'll see where your batteries come from, the lithium ion, and you realize why you shouldn't get a phone every year.
Wow, 100%. I guess me, I don't know. I've never been an Apple fan, but I've become an Apple fan along
Apple's
the
better
way.
now. Apple's better now.
Yeah. And one quote, non-Islamic, one quote that inspires you on a daily basis.
I really suck at this. My favorite one is dream big and achieve bigger.
Amazing. Fantastic. And I love challenge your limits, not limit your challenges. That's the one that does for me. And the favorite, I guess, YouTube or social media channel that you like to follow all the time.
That's another tough one. This is going to be controversial. I'd say Andrew Tate, but don't take in everything he says. Yeah.
Interesting. Brother Ali, thank you so much for facilitating this conversation, and I hope our viewers have, I guess, learned more about Ali. And if there is a sister out there who likes the look of Ali and who likes what he's said so far, then definitely reach out to Learn to Revert channel and pitch yourself.
Inshallah is the right one.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. And we'll carry on talking offline.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And that's it for today on Side by Side. I hope you have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation as much as I have, with myself, Kazi Shafiqur Rahman, and our special guest, Brother Ali, also known as Learn to Revert on Instagram. If you have enjoyed our conversation, please do consider sharing this episode with your family and friends, and also subscribing to the channel on the platform you are tuned into. It is your subscription that motivates us to continue with our journey and our efforts with Side by Side, episode after episode. And with that said, I bid you farewell, and you will see us on our next episode. Assalamu alaikum.